Hello again, welcome back, and you're still watching Joy News Prime. Let's do the second half of business. The receiver appointed by the Bank of Ghana to handle Beige Bank's liquidation is now going after personal assets of former owner Michael Jinaku. This was after Ni Amano Dodu filed an application at the High Court earlier this week. Judge Rafi has more in this report.
Mr. Dodu, through his lawyers, is asking the court to take over the residential property of Mr. Jinaku at Trasacco and the Beige Group head office, all located at East Legon here in Accra, as well as other properties that were purchased with the funds of the bank. The receiver is also asking the court to help him retrieve a little over 1.2 billion Ghana cedis owed the defunct bank by suing Mr. Jinaku, as well as 12 other subsidiaries under the Beige Group. The application argues that Mr. Jinaku breached his duties as director of the defunct bank, and therefore he is liable for all the bank's losses. The receiver is also asking the court to let Mr. Jinaku return everything that is secured as a result of transactions from these properties. An injunction is also being sought to stop all the shareholders and former directors in possession of these assets from disposing them as well. It appears the receiver is moving fast to recover funds that have been sunk in by government to help with the liquidation of the bank. Government has already spent about 15 billion Ghana cedis and is projected to hit 18 billion Ghana cedis by the end of this year. The receiver for UT and Capital Banks recently noted that he's having some challenges in recovering all the assets of these former directors, as most of them were not registered in their name.
I'm honored to have financial analyst Charles Spencer with me here in the studio to talk more about this issue. Grateful for your time.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, is there no way out in this whole issue? Yes, I know the receiver will want to, retrieve as much as he can. And the money that we are talking about here is about 1.36 billion Ghana cedis. So do you think that going to court is the best way, or there should be a way out to settle it out of court?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. I think first and foremost, the receiver would probably go through the books and would try and recover as much as he can. Where there are collateral securities, he will probably liquidate some of these securities. It is after they've gone through all these processes and they've realized that, look, we have to leave the veil of incorporation and tackle the personality behind it. Because when it is that loan have been granted, collateral security have been provided, and you realize that something untoward happened, you can lift the veil of incorporation and tackle the personalities or the persons behind it, and then retrieve as much as you can. So going to court is the right thing to do. The court will then look at it, the merits of it, and may grant it or may not grant it. And when they grant it, it means that they are going to retrieve as much as they can, because it means that the properties that he has will go under auction. And then monies will be accrued through the receiver, and then he will account for it. Because don't forget that taxpayers' money have been provided to cover for the depositors' money. Because in the whole exercise, it is those who borrow from the bank and those who deposited money at the bank. So those who deposited money at the bank, they've been protected by the taxpayer. So those who borrow from the bank, you need to retrieve as much as you can. Then you can reduce the burden on the taxpayer.
All right, Mr. Mensah, well said. But you know how the court system works. If we really need this money as soon as we can, going to court, is it not going to drag it? And maybe there should be some payment terms agreed on. Is that the wiser option to go?
I think so, because once the court decides, because the court will decide on the merits, the case before them, and then the owners or owner of the bank would equally also get lawyers. So they will look at the merits of the case. Once they give the green light, then the assets would go under auction to retrieve how much they can and to reduce the amount. Because don't forget that the amount involved, we are told, is about 1.3 billion thereabout. So we are going for the assets to reduce that debt burden.
I see.
And it's very important. And it's only court that can decide. The receiver in its own cannot, unless they are collateral security, unless you are forcing those who borrow the money to come and pay back. Usually when it happens like that, some of the owners would like to sell the assets themselves to pay back the loan. But when it comes falls under auction, you may not retrieve the full amount that the ordinary you would have gotten.
All right, so should we expect directors of other defunct banks, because mind you, it wasn't only Beige Bank that was in this situation, so should we expect that other directors of other defunct banks found culpable of similar action should have same verdict as being done?
It depends. You see, if the other directors and shareholders are making good of the exposure that they've had with the bank, there's no need to go to court. Because if you've been told that the exposure to you, based on the loans that you've granted, based on the records, we think that you have to cough up, let's say, 50 million cedis, and you can raise that on your own and pay back. We won't go through that route. But once that is not retrievable, then the only way around is to go to court and seek the court's approval, and then you can proceed from there.
All right, so 1.36 million, yes, we want to retrieve as much as we can, but do you think it's going to be enough? And what happens to the rest if you're not able to get that money, the full amount from the sale of these assets?
What it is already, as we speak, the taxpayer is bearing all these costs involved. So whatever you retrieve, whichever amount you retrieve, would reduce the total exposure on the taxpayer. So if out of the 1.3 billion cedis, for instance, they are able to retrieve, let's say, for the sake of argument, 500,000 or 500 million cedis. Whatever it is that is the taxpayer that's bearing it, because already you are reducing what the taxpayer. If you listen to Joyce's piece, was saying that the total amount is about 15 billion. That's what the taxpayer is paying. That's what government is raising through the bonds. So any amount that you raise or you retrieve from the assets would reduce the 15 billion to the next amount. I mean, if it's 500, it means that 14.5. If it's $1 billion, it means that it's going to 14. So what we are seeking to do is always to try as much as possible to retrieve something from the people. All
right, let's deviate quickly before you go. Recently, the minimum capital requirement for the insurance sector was increased as well. What do you make of the over 200% increment?
I think it's long overdue.
Right.
First and foremost, you see, insurance, there were mushrooms, there were a lot of insurance companies, and once we are cleaning the financial system, we cannot clean the mainstream banks without the insurance. So I think it's long overdue. Maybe we probably would have to see a lot of measures and... In
the insurance space?
Yeah, in the insurance space. We have to see a lot of measures and then some people going under. But I want to see more Ghanaians coming together to form a very strong insurance company, because insurance is the way to go. So to have a very strong insurance company so that they can play part in the financial service sector.
Mr. Charles Mensah, I'm grateful for your time. Charles Mensah is financial analyst. We've been talking about the receiver going after the assets of Beige Bank. So the commodity market now, crude oil sold, and it actually maintained what it was yesterday to sell at $66.51 a barrel. As of 5 p.m. today, precious mineral gold dropped in price to trade at $1,408.11 a ton. The commodity news is up next. I'm grateful for your time this evening on Business with me, Sandra Esenam. And you can get more news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business and more.